Hi, I'm Sheryl Sitz. Today we're joined by a master storyteller who's participated in some extraordinary healing ceremonies with the bushmen in the Kalahari Desert. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Possibilities. We broadcast now on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, my website, journeyofpossibilities.com, and my new YouTube channel, youtube.com/Sheryl Sitz. It's our mission in each and every show to explore holistic spiritual ways that you can transform your life from the inside out. We'll speak with today's guest, Neil Del Strother, in just a moment. Mario Rosales of Tech Life Balance and I invest a lot of time, energy, and money into creating some high-quality podcasts each week and sharing those with you. Do you like what you hear on our show? If so, we'd love for you to drop us a little love once in a while with your contribution of any amount that's comfortable for you at journeyofpossibilities.com/support. We appreciate it, and we couldn't do it without your help, so thank you so much. Speaking of, Mario, we've been doing this for a while. I learn so much from our guests every week. I love doing this and broadening our reach around the world. How long have we been at this now?
We've been here since 2012 on this podcast. And what do you guys think? Are you enjoying the content? How about you? Have you actually thought about doing one also? I know when I started with Sheryl was like, what in the world's a podcast? And I thought it was an excellent way for her to get her message out. And I want to share this with you also. So if you want a podcast, or if you've been contemplating, what kind of message would you want to put out in a podcast? And I start you from the beginning, just like I started with Sheryl. So why not contact me at mariorosales.net or at techlifebalance.net. Thank you so much.
Who are you? Why are you here? What wonders and opportunities await you beyond physical death? What happened millennia ago to create the damaged earth and fractured societies you see around you? Empowering, enlightening, internationally acclaimed, the Joseph Communications books offer answers to these questions. Spiritual, concise, contemporary, non-denominational, the communications originate from Joseph, a highly evolved discarnate spirit concerned for you and the future of the planet and its peoples. The words of Joseph and his soul group give you the power to bring light and change into your own life and the lives of others and to restore the earth. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats, the communications can be ordered today at www.thejosephcommunications.com, and also from Amazon and other major booksellers. All proceeds are used for further publishing and advertising and to make the communications available worldwide.
And now for today's guest. Neil Del Strother is the author of 6 novels to date. He's a freelance writer of 20 years, a senior journey practitioner of 17 years, a podcast host, and a father. He has a master's in journalism, a dip psych, an honors degree in politics and American studies, and his experience in shamanism includes taking part in some extraordinary healing ceremonies with the bushmen in the Kalahari Desert. I'm noticing an African theme lately. That's kind of interesting. We'll have to explore that. You'll find him online at neildelstrother.co.uk. Welcome, Neil.
Hi. Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us from across the pond, where it's a little bit later in the evening.
It is, and a little bit colder, I suspect. But anyway, yeah, spring is coming.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a little bit later getting to you, isn't it? It was around Christmas, actually, when I found your website, and it's unusual for me to do that where I'm surfing the web and I just reach out to somebody, but I felt such a connection to you and what you do. And then I got an opportunity to read your book, The Flower in the Desert. What a great storyteller you are.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's lovely. Being English, I want to get all bashful on you now. So I don't, how do I answer that? Thank you very much. I will take that compliment openly.
Good. Please do. It was such a treat to read your book. Sometimes I read a lot of books doing this show because, you know, I interview a lot of authors, and that means I read a lot of books. And this was just, I couldn't put it down. It was delightful. But before I jump into your book, I kind of want to get to know you a little better, especially this Kalahari bit. That's interesting. How did that come to be for you?
That was a really amazing trip, I have to say. Well, I've been doing over the years quite a bit of shamanic work amongst other things that I do, and there was just an opportunity to go with a bunch of people who was, you know, learning shamanism, I suppose. to go to the Kalahari. So we went about, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 of us, and we went right into the middle of the Kalahari. Not around the Okavango Delta and all that, around that sort of area, and then hundreds of miles right in the middle of nowhere. And there was just this amazing festival going on, which was this Bushman dance festival with different well, not only Bushmen, tribes from all over Africa turning up. So you're walking through this campsite with people. It was just beautiful, actually, but mind-boggling, to see just being in this place. And then, but we also had arranged these Bushmen to do these ceremonies. And so sort of right in the middle of the desert with just the moon and the stars, they dressed up in how they would have been dressed, millennia ago, doing all the chanting and the dancing and the boiling energy when they just sort of almost they do go into trance. And then this really powerful healing stuff going on with us. And it was incredible, to be honest. It was really remarkable and fantastic.
It sounds like it. What was like last show, we actually interviewed a woman, Carly Matamore, who wrote about the sacred messengers of shamanic Africa, and she's been to Africa several times. So I think this Africa theme is interesting and it's emerging for me now. What wisdom did you bring home from Africa, if you had to sum it up, something that stands out for you from that?
Well, part of the wisdom was that I wasn't all that brilliant at shamanism. it was just so incredible, because they did these ceremony and did this healing, and it was like, incredible, and you could feel this energy and this connection. And then they wanted us to do it to them, and it was like, oh my good God, it was like Einstein asking me to teach him physics. It was just impossible. And so, in a way, I mean, humility is one of the things I think I learned.
Yeah.
But the other was, I don't know, just the sense of wonder. This sort of incredible sense of wonder and richness. And I suppose I'd bring it in now. This sense of just so much we have to treasure, and that we should be treasuring.
Yeah, I would imagine the connection between us and the planet would be strong in a place like that, where they still celebrate that as a way of life.
I think so. I mean, actually, the Bushman story is generally a very sad one. They've been treated appallingly, but there still is underneath this tradition, and they can still, key into it as if nothing's happened, as if they're still living wild and free in the Kalahari, which they're not. Very few are,
Right.
And yes, but it's this connection, because we sat in this something called the Strother Hills, which is like these hills in the middle of absolutely nowhere, where Lawrence van der Post went and found these cave drawings. And it's effectively, this is, it probably isn't, but it's seen as the first place of man.
Yes.
So you're in this cave in the Strother Hills where we're doing this big meditation thing, and I was just thinking, this is just such, I don't know, you could just feel the connection to where we came from, and that reconnecting with the sort of natural us is, in a very conscious way, is, I think, one of our great challenges now.
I agree with that. And it almost feels, when I'm feeling into you talking about it and describing what it was like this time portal opens, right? Or the illusion of time disappears, and where we come from is where we are now. Like it doesn't seem like such a far distance as it does in our modern world.
No, I think in our sort of hearts, there's no distance at all. But in our minds, unfortunately, we've got sucked into a way of being that's very divorced from that.
Yes. You mentioned quite a lifetime of shamanic practices and shamanic studies that you've had, and your book is directly tied to, or an outbirthing of that, because your book, this is such a quick, beautiful read. And I'm speaking, of course, about The Flower in the Desert.
Yeah.
And it's heart-centered. And that, to me, is, if I had to define what's different about the shamanic path, it's heart-centered. And we've moved away from that. And this is a beautiful story about the journey back to the heart, or connecting with the heart.
Yes. I mean, shamanic, and it's also the other journey thing I do is more to do with trauma and emotional work. And I see, the way I see it, it's no particular tradition that the book is about. In fact, the book, I could even go as far as, I mean, I sort of know what I was feeling and intending with the book when I was writing it, but I in a way, there's a different meaning for everybody. In a way, it's the space. I was thinking about it before you rang, actually, because I wrote it purposefully, very simply, and I feel it's a little bit like the notes. You know, like when you listen to music, it's the silence that, in a sense, defines the music, the silence between the notes. And I feel in that book, that's what I'm hoping is felt.
Yes. Yes. It's not a very large book. It's not a very lengthy book.
No.
But there is so much in there. It is rich with symbolism. It's written in such a simple way that I felt like a little girl sitting down to story time again. And I haven't felt that reading a book in a long time. And yet it's rich with meaning. The symbolism, it's rich with things that we can really awaken to in our adult life. The returning journey to the flower in the desert. I don't want to give the whole story away. How do you sum it up when someone asks you what it's about?
I generally stutter and fall over and can't quite do it. So it's very hard for me to do, because, as you say, the story, it sounds like very simple, and of course it's the felt sense as you're reading it.
Yes.
But I would say it is a journey that we all have on offer, and some of us take. I don't think everyone does take it, and it is a great shame that everyone doesn't, because it is reconnecting with our essential nature. I'm not specifically saying that's what it's about, actually, but I mean effectively that's what in general is about.
Yes, and the interesting paradigm shift, or the paradox of it, is he goes on a journey out of his little village and into the desert and finds himself. And that tends to be what we do. We think we need to get somewhere. We think we need to be somewhere. But it's when we finally take whatever journey that unexpectedly leads us into the heart of ourself that life really begins. And you're right. There are some people that I know that have gone through many, many years of their life and never taken that. And I've had people tell me the journey I've been on for the last decade's kind of nuts, because I went to Peru and started I took a pretty interesting dive too, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I feel like in many ways that's when my life began. How do you sum up the shamanic path for you?
Well, I think there's this great paradox is that actually being opening to what you're talking about, this being connected to oneself, being connected beyond oneself, is actually not easy. I mean, it's a big, it's allowing all of the emotional stuff. It's allowing all of the thoughts. It's allowing everything. And of course that can be quite scary. It's, very often we try and diminish our lives to control them, and it's the opposite. And then it's to realize that they aren't that which we have thought was our life isn't our life. It is it's an aspect of our lives, but it's not the essential life.
Absolutely. And a whole lot of it is just a distraction, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I know. And the one thing I must say, I mean, of course, I can talk very wisely here, but, like anybody else, I can cock things up left, right, and centre. It's not a problem. But it's, but there is, and I think that's part of it, that we can, that lives go on, but it's just being, it's not even anchored, but being opened into the place where it comes from, or it is experienced.
So we kind of got deep here pretty quickly, but I tend to do that with guests, so I hope that's all right. I think the listeners have come to expect it by now. It's like, okay, get your seatbelt on, we're going in.
I could do lighter, cup of tea, I could do English, nice buses, no problem.
Well, I wanted to kind of ask you an overarching question, because I keep referring to the shamanic journey, the shamanic practices, the shamanic traditions. How do you define shamanism? Is it a religion to you? Is it a perspective? What is it?
And it's, I wouldn't want to over-egg my, abilities in it. As I say, I think no, it definitely isn't. In fact, I think it's unreligion. It's about letting go of the things that we hold on to as being truths and sitting in what is. It's like unpicking. And I think it has a lot of, there's different types of shamanism, obviously, and there's different ways that people experience things. But for me, it's a sort of, I suppose, a nature tradition, quite a gentle one, actually, relatively. And I think that there's animism, the idea that everything has a life, everything has, at some level, everything is alive. And, there's so much talk about being one and all the rest of it that, generally in this world these days. But I mean, in reality, if that's true, then everything is alive. There is something, depending what we mean by alive, but there's a vibration, there's a connectedness throughout it all. And I think shamanism is absolutely about that.
I agree. I love that, an unreligion. I'm hanging on to that one. I'll give you credit for it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That's true. And everything does have an essence or a spirit, as some say, however you want to look at it. So where does trauma fit in? How do you explain the work that you do with trauma? Because I don't think if we say, oh, yeah, and he'll help you heal your trauma, people don't really want to go into their trauma because it hurts, right? So how do you... Is it that they just rip it open somehow one day, or it catches up with them and they decide to do it, or how do people find you in your work?
So often it's people. I mean, the sad thing is that very often it's people who are very ill, because they've, I never want to attribute anything to anything in a sense, because I don't know. But you do feel that if people aren't allowing their emotions, say if they've been sexually abused and they don't allow that to be felt, released. I don't know about healed, but at least the wound to be there and to be felt. Then they're holding it, and then it's something that can fester, not always. And then if that leads on to something else, and then it could manifest in something physical, and not always. People can live very healthy, happy lives and never touch any of this stuff. But if it does, then quite often they come to something like the journey, which is what I do, because it's a very powerful way of just going, right. We're not going to talk for 10 years in therapy, although that has its value, but we're just going to take a sledgehammer and smash into it and trust that your body knows what healing it needs.
Yeah, it is a sledgehammer. That's what I found when I went in. I was working with plant medicine, and I'm not sure if you're referring to working with plant medicines or drumming or sound, or there's many ways.
The journey thing I do is not with plant medicine. I'm very aware of all that area, but actually it's not something I've been involved in. I've been more involved in working with it. It's a particular process I do, but a sort of interpretation of it, which takes people into their body in a different sort of way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Are you able to do that at a distance, or do they need to come to you?
No, I can do that on Skype. Yeah, Skype works. Yes, I can. Yeah, Skype's very good, actually. In fact, I often do with people, all over the place, to be honest. But, the absolute best, I guess, would be face-to-face. But it's if someone's present, if someone's open, if someone's ready, that's enough.
Yes. And I have experienced both. I have experienced some very effective work at a distance using technology to connect. And it's absolutely on us. It's about creating the space to be able to be present and open and vulnerable, whatever the process. If you need to fly there to do it, right? If you can do it in your living room, that's great too.
I think if we've done the work, if we're continuing to do the work, if we're humble and not pretending that we're somehow superior, if we're not pretending we're not without wounds, then that's permission to someone else. Someone else can feel that. If I'm working with someone, I'm just not coming from any place of hubris. Sometimes I think, my God, what am I doing this when I've perhaps had an argument with someone or something? But there's something sort of channeled. Sounds like I'm talking about channeling, but there's something that comes through us rather than from us. That because we've done work, it creates a spaciousness that allows things to come through, which is true of the writing I do, by the way, but it's definitely true also of the journey work I do.
And it's all powerful work. I felt that reading your book was healing. There was a healing energy to your book, to the gentleness of the process.
I would really like to feel that each of the books is our healing, actually. I mean, it's lovely you say that. I'm delighted you say that, because from my point of view, that would be the genre of books that deal with, because my journey has been about working with emotional traumas of staff, my own issues and what have you, and I feel very much that when I work through something, what I'm giving, I hope, is a gift that allows other people to work through it.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Not consciously, by the way, because consciously in a way, but the books aren't like very, I hope, not anyway sort of precious or self-righteous or anything. The idea is that they're good stories or, very readable. But definitely I
Yes.
feel that deeper thing is there too.
Well, I'm hooked. I'm going to read. So what's the next best book I should read that you've written?
Oh my God. Yeah, I had a horrible feeling you might ask me something like that. Well, there's the ones on Skype are nice and easy for you to get hold of, which is handy. But the other one that go with a deer on a lead is the second one that I wrote. Well, no, actually, it isn't the second one I wrote, but it's one that I wrote subsequent to the other one, obviously. And that's very much it's a sort of mixture of fantasy and reality, and ostensibly it's and not that full on. It's about the healing of somebody who becomes anorexic, and they become anorexic, and they, through a sort of fantasy type thing, it meets with the healing. But obviously that fantasy is, of course, how our unconscious works. Our unconscious doesn't think in words and so on in the same way. It's through symbols and through lots of other bits and pieces, but certainly not like our conscious mind's work. And of course, so it's based, at that level, it's going into the unconscious and finding the healing there. So that might be one.
Yeah, that sounds like a good story.
Yeah. There's one called, I can go through, but I won't go through more. But there's one called Aurora Rising, which I think is very good for people who are working with grief. That's very much a grieving book, and one thing that I'm very strong on is that I think grieving is something we do very bad. Certainly in England, I expect in the States, we do very badly. The idea is we're meant to sort of just pull it together, get ourselves together, put on a brave face, all this stuff. And yeah, I think if we can't grieve, and I don't mean just for a death, I mean perhaps for a childhood that wasn't lived fully, or even for, just not catching the bus. If we're not able to grieve, if we're not able to feel that the sort of the more sad, or whatever way you want to call the feelings, melancholy feelings, how can we feel the love? Because it's the other side of the same coin, and actually it's imbued with love. Grieving is a beautiful thing if we do it in a conscious, lovely way.
And it's so true. Our culture is not one to do that. We, the minute we see someone who's down, we got to cheer them up, and we've got to move those feelings to something more positive. We're very judgmental about our emotions, aren't we?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's down grieving. I would say it's like, a river will run through some beautiful scenery, and it'll run through some ravines, and which are also beautiful, but you know what I mean? It'll run through some wastelands, but the river is still the river. It's not a down feeling in itself. It's just part of the experience of working through things, moving through.
Spoken as eloquently as I would expect from a good writer. Thank you for that. That was beautiful imagery. And that was my initiation into the shamanic. I traveled to Peru, and I've told this story, I think, on the show before, but I did the diet and everything expecting to prepare myself for ayahuasca. And he said, "You're not ready for that." And
right.
And then when a shaman brews you a tea, get ready. And he said, "I'm going to brew you a little tea because you have a few tears to cry." And for 6 months I cried because I had not grieved anything in my life. And I had a lot that I was carrying, and it was all in my body. So I know that he saved my life with that. And now I cry a lot more easily than I used to, but I still am learning how to just let go. It's very ingrained in our society not to let that side of ourselves show.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And even listening to you, I feel quite tearful listening to you. We could have a weep in on the radio. Yes, and I think that what a beautiful story, because I think sometimes I think with a lot of things it can be there is a time and place for them, and it sounds like that's just such a beautiful thing to recognize that.
Yes, absolutely.
And we don't allow it. I'm brought up in England. In America, you're allowed a bit more emotion. I think in England, in historically, it was sort of we were. It was very unwholesome to show any emotion. Or, oh my God, stiff upper lip and,
yes.
Let's get on with it. I suppose the cost of that has just been diabolical to our lives, to the richness of our world, to to the way that we, to the way that we don't honour the environment, to the way, to the way we treat each other. And I would say that a lot of roots of that are in a sort of, I'd call it, I mean, to call it abuse would be pushing it, but there's sort of, in a sense, the lowest level abuse of just not allowing people to feel and be connected to who they are.
Yes, absolutely. It's a true identity crisis when we've only allowed ourselves to express a fragment of the range of emotions that we're born with. We really don't have a true sense of our identity because we've made 80% of it something that we can't ever use.
Exactly. And I mean, part of the fear that people have, I think, is that if they feel, I know, and, I recognize it myself that, if, for example, you're going to feel rage or terror or something, that means some action, but of course it doesn't. When it's like, if you look with a little baby or something, it's just the felt thing. It's feeling it in the body and letting it be felt, letting it burn, let it, vibrate, whatever it is, and let it just be felt and work through. But don't try and put a lid on it. And because you think, oh my God, if I do that, I'm going to go out and, do something awful. But the far more likelihood that someone will go out and do something awful if they've put a lid on it.
Yes. And you're absolutely tapping into something there. We are kind of afraid to feel it because we don't know what it's going to drive us to do, right? So we just keep stuffing it down in the body where it's not meant to be held. So
it's terrifying. And, the whole industry of, antidepressants and all the rest of it is all about, and drinking, whatever. I mean, I enjoy beer, I'm English, but, but all this stuff is all about pushing things down.
Yes.
It's all about it. And it's so peculiar. A remedy for somebody going a bit off because they're not in connection with their lives and with nature and with the planet or whatever, is to think, well, in that case we better drive that further down because we don't want that rising up because it might make you feel uncomfortable for a while.
Yeah.
So let's just completely narcotize everybody and then just get on with doing nonsense things and not know why we're doing it.
Don't you think that's why the shamanism and the shamanic practices and traditions are becoming so popular now? Because it's kind of this big sigh of relief as more and more people find it and go, oh, good, because I couldn't hold it all in anymore. I needed something to tell me it was okay to let this out and to reconnect. And
I definitely think so, and I think one of the great hopeful things is that this is, perhaps we live in a bubble where everybody we're in an algorithm where everybody agrees with us, but it's nonetheless, one of the hopeful things is that more and more people are catching this fire, aren't they? They're feeling, hey, this isn't okay as it is. We've got to change.
Yes.
I mean, I was just on a pilgrimage with something called Extinction Rebellion. I don't know whether you have it out there, but it's a group of a movement over here anyway that is to do with, hey, we've got to make some major changes to get our planet in order, and not just for human beings but for all the animals that are suffering and the mass extinction and the climate change and everything. We have to step forwards, and to step forwards authentically we need to feel it, and it is overwhelming, and we need to be okay to be overwhelmed. And we need to keep walking forwards and keep meeting ourselves all the time. And it's a challenge of our time.
Wow. I have goosebumps. That was really powerful, what you just said. Absolutely. And, I do know that it is catching on because I live in a very, very conservative part of the United States. And change is showing up here. It's showing up everywhere. I think the real drive for that is the mobility of our planet and the access on our planet, between technology connecting us with people around the world so that our viewpoint is forever questioned and challenged and new suggestions and ideas emerge. And then we get on planes and travel around the world. And so between more travel than ever and more communication than ever, I think these ideas are continuing to crisscross around and people are moving and relocating and bringing them.
I do too, and I do think we're in a time of crisis, and crisis can go either way. This is why we have to step forwards, because it's not good enough now, not anymore, just to sit and think, well, I feel quite wise with this. It is about action too, and I think we are aware. Most of us are aware. Obviously, you're never going to make everybody in the world, feel the same or whatever, or have the same view. I mean, it wouldn't even be healthy, but to understand the crisis, but it is about stepping forwards. It definitely is, and it may only be in a little way. I mean, I hope through my writing I do it. It's just using our gifts, whatever they happen to be, to work, to really to connect together in this great mesh of change, And I just wanted to add one thing actually, which because it came to me when you were talking, is I remember very strongly Eckhart Tolle saying something about at times of great crisis the extremes get stronger, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing. There's a great unveiling going on, and the extremes are getting stronger and stronger. But I would like, in my optimistic moments, I would like to feel that the side of love and nurturing and a lot of feminine values, by the way, the regaining of the feminine into what has been too male will prevail. I hope so.
I do believe that. And and it is even in the smallest of ways. So yes, we're doing this podcast, and I want to get these messages out week after week. And that's not only do I love doing this, and it is a treat to do it, but it's important to share these perspectives. And you never know when someone else is going to hear them. And so in that way, but it's also about throwing it in the recycle bin instead of the trash can. It's about, I drive my recycling because I for so long I was unconscious to that. And now that I see how much recycling I go through, it's like, oh my gosh, how much did I send to the trash? Just oblivious, right? Yes,
exactly. And also I think, the other thing is to embrace failure, because you're not going to be perfect,
right?
You're not. Some people think, well, if I'm going to be vegetarian, for example, then I'm going to have to be vegan or whatever, and that's fine. But you can eat meat, you can do what you like. It's just making a step.
Yes.
Don't think that to change means you have to be perfect at it.
Yes.
You can be rubbish at it, but at least you can do a little bit. It doesn't matter. In fact, being rubbish at it is quite good in a way, because I think we don't want a humorless world.
Yeah.
We want a world where we can cock up, we can make. But the flow is for the good.
Yes, we're trying. We're giving it a shot, right?
yeah, exactly. And we might as well have fun while we're doing it. It's might as well dance. We might as well make the most of it. It's not. It shouldn't be some sort of pious. There's a horrible temptation, isn't there, to go back into our historical roots of sort of extra. Too much piousness, too much sort of dogma, too much rule-driven stuff. No, it's about being free. It's about being loving. It's about being connected with the sort of dance of the world. And, that's about shedding this stuff, not about taking on more of it.
Wow, I could listen to you all day. I'm just sitting here. I was ready to just let you keep going. You're saying some great stuff. What else would you like our listeners to kind of reflect on? What else has been coming up for you lately as we go through this transformative time on our planet?
Go on, that's a question and a half. I suppose a lot of it is about the sort of perhaps disconnect, but it isn't, between the sort of life I can lead, the amount of sort of things I get wrong, the times I notice how unevolved I am, the times I see how petty I can be, all this stuff, which somehow seems like, oh my God, I haven't made any progress at all in my life. Look at me, I'm just a, just a idiot. And then at other times, just noticing that it's about integrating that. It's not about letting go of that. Not letting go. It's not about sort of thinking, my God, I can't be like that. It's like somehow learning to love what I am as I am, which I have to say, as I say, I'm really not trying to picture myself as any sort of hugely evolved being. It's every day is different. And, when I'm talking to you, I'm listening to myself thinking, crikey, I'm sounding quite good now. But another moment, I might be having a discussion with my daughter about, I don't know, some TV thing, and just arguing about Justin Bieber. It's just embracing it all, and it's all okay. It doesn't all have to be anything in particular, and it's something about that inclusiveness that just it's all okay that allows real involvement.
That is so true, because the minute we ought to and we should, boy, then that rebel kicks in too, right behind it, right? And it's like,
exactly.
Forget that.
It's like, I was actually talking to someone about meditation earlier, and it's a typical thing for meditators to get quite, dogmatic and really down on themselves as their mind's thinking. But actually, it's like, let your mind think. It's not the problem. let it think all it wants, but just stay with the breath or however you do it. And if you meditate for 10 years and you never once, I'm not saying you have to meditate, well, obviously, but using that as an analogy, and you don't once hit that moment of pure moment being present. That's okay. It's okay. Just be with it.
Yes, I love that. I was telling someone this week also about meditation. At first it seems like the mind races and races and races, but it does start to slow down. It's not used to being observed. It's used to.
It's a paradox, isn't it? Because if you try and stop your mind, you're not going to stop it. If you say to your mind, you can do what you like, you do what you like, mate. It's fine. I'm just going to sit in the other room and twiddle my fingers doing something else, and that's completely. Then it's fine, because the mind will think, oh, it's not so much fun now. so you're just giving it permission. Here, you're free.
That's excellent. So I've got a writer on the line. I would be silly not to ask for your greatest tip for writing. How do you get into that space where it just, as you said, it flows through you, something greater than you flows through you and kind of writes itself?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. Well, I think the first thing to realize is that, because then you don't have to get off on the idea that you have to be good or bad or anything else. It's about actually sitting and doing it. I think a routine is great. I think doing work on yourself, as far as I'm concerned, is great in terms of releasing emotions, releasing trauma, releasing everything, because then the body wants to speak anyway, or things. There is room for the body to be spoken through. I think it's not to feel you have to come up with something extraordinary to move people. I mean, it depends what sort of writer you are. I mean, I work with emotional stuff, I suppose, so it's different to doing a detective novel. But from my point of view, if you want to connect with other people, then really speak authentically from what's true with yourself. And the more connected you are with that, the more you continuously work with the process of it, the more other people will feel it, because at that level there's one heart. You're opening to the great heart. Your heart is just an individual aspect of that great heart, but the more that your heart can allow itself just to be free, then of course you're connecting immediately with everybody else. And we're all glorious failures, if you want to put it that way. We're all glorious idiots when we're all marvelous, and it's fine, and we don't need to hide. I mean, American culture, as I understand it, has been very success driven, which is great. It's come up with lots of things, but of course the problem with that is that people aren't okay with feeling the negative of that, the underlying sort of the shadow side of that. And we need to be okay with both. And so if you're writing, I'm going to something else here, but if you're writing, is to allow all of that to be expressed. And one other thing, actually, I really want to say, because it's something I've struggled with a lot. You hear a lot from writers, and they may well be right, that you should write every day, you should do this, it must be obsessive, you've got to, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think that's true. I think you have to be true to your own routine, the own way you do it. And the one thing you do have to do is to make sure you do write regularly, but it doesn't have to be in any rigid way. And obviously the more you practice, the better you get.
Wisdom from the heart. Thank you for that. That was wonderful. And we always love to learn from what we ourselves have overcome. So I love that last part too.
Yes, well, of course, yeah, absolutely.
So what's next for you? Are you working on another book? Do you have any events coming up?
I am working on a book at the moment, and I'm quite near finishing it, actually, which I'm bringing a bit of sex into spirituality, or spirituality to sex. This is the what they call it. I can't think what they call it offhand. Bonk buster. It's because, I'll tell you why, because I think that his story, I mean, the reason is that he just felt that it needs something to be written, which is usually how it is for me. But it also feels like sexuality and sex in all its forms has not been honored, because again, if people think, well, spirituality, whatever that means, which to me means just being here, but conscious of it, but often seem to think that has some conflict with sexuality, because obviously in Christian tradition and a lot of other religious traditions, it has sort of had that sort of, it has been that way. But I think it's a very, very important thing to open to celebrating sexuality. It's not only about sex, by the way, but it's got that aspect to it. and to really realize how that can be expressed in various different ways. It doesn't always have to be pretty, but it's to be true. Again, it's being authentic, and this is one area where people often aren't authentic.
Yes, you're definitely speaking to me there. That's been a lot of my healing journey, has been to overcome the trauma and then come to a place of my own wholeness, and then to explore a more positive way of looking at it. So it's completely rewriting the story. So I look forward to your book. So that's almost done, huh?
It is. Well, yes, I think it is. I'm going through. I've done a number of edits, and I think there's going to be probably a couple more. But yes, I mean, I'm pleased with it. It's got yeah, and it is this. It is and it's also the aspect that we have this idealized love, don't we? We all want to have this perfect love, and if we're talking about with a person, but that can make us not appreciate the love that's in each of the relationships we have, which might not have that full on, trumpeting love, so it also involves that journey, the sort of even the momentary one night stands of our lives or whatever. Not that any of us, of course, would have those. Just forbid the thought. But it's this sort of even all those sort of experiences that we might have had. We sometimes people are so self-damning about these things, and you think, you know what, you could change that and see it as something beautiful and loving and glorious in itself.
Yes, I would say that overall has been how the shamanic practices have changed my life. Is I have made peace with all of my life. And you're right. There are about 1 million ways that we judge and make ourselves wrong or bad or whatever, and lock all those places up and say, I'm never going to do any of that again, until we're in this little bitty box trying to live our lives.
And I've had background, I had a background that was by coincidence, not quite religious. My parents weren't religious, but I was sent to a religious school for a while. And I really suffered for it. And even now, quite a lot of the drive for the sort of freedom and the opening is because of the damage and rigidity of that religion. I don't want to diss religion, obviously. I mean, people are very authentic with it, but for me, it was very constraining to what was real for me, what was natural, who I knew I was, or am. And that conflict, and you could use religion to just societal rules and laws and all the things people think we need to imprint on kids, because otherwise they'll all go, feral. I just think we need to question this, because I think children learn from what they see, not from what we tell them.
Yes.
And if we can't do it, if we can't be free, if we can't be loving, if we can't be humble, if we can't see ourselves for the sort of glorious fools we are, then how can they? Just because I tell someone they should behave or they shouldn't do that, that's just rubbish. If they watch what I do, if I somehow emanate this sort of lovingness, if I muck things up but that's okay, and if I then get some things right and that's okay, then they've got a chance to live in freedom with it.
You're so refreshing. I love the way you are accepting of yourself and the rest of us, warts and all, as the expression says.
Well, I think it's a huge, I think it's hugely important, and I just, you just hear so many moral judgments everywhere.
Yes.
And it's not that I don't have them; it's just that I recognize them for the lies they are.
Yes. And isn't that an interesting thing to do when we've gone on and had so much education and spent a lot of our hard-earned time and money to cram our heads full of information and wisdoms, quote unquote, only to spend the rest of our lives unlearning that.
Oh, you know what? I mean, that really, really resonates for me, because my dad was very much an academic. I was brought up to think that academics was what it was about.
Yes.
And I realized, I was sort of fortunate and unfortunate. I went to a number of different schools, but in a way that probably allowed me not to be totally sausage factory. But, basically it's like pushing the life out of you. I've said recently, most schools in England, I don't know about America, they wear a uniform. Well, what the hell does uniform mean? You want them all to be the same. You want them all to fit into the nice little box, because you're fearful that people don't do that. Everything's going to be chaos, which is rubbish, because it isn't. But it's the fear, and fear drives so much. And I found that I would consider myself overeducated. I think God, how often do I have to think things through when it's easier just to drop into the heart and forget about thinking it through? There is a place, of course, for intellect. I think that's an important thing, and we need to have discernment and vigilance, which I remember reading something Gangaji wrote about that, and I absolutely couldn't agree more, or I bow to her wisdom. But so intellect is important, but it needs to be flavored all the time with a connection to love, however we want to. Well, I think we feel it is not descriptive.
Well put. Very well put. Neil, I could visit with you all day. I've so enjoyed our time together and all that you bring and share with us. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to ask you if you have a parting thought that you'd like to leave our listener with today.
Wow. Well, I think within the flavor of this, I would say, I'll tell you what, I'll just tell them all to go and dance. I think it's a lovely thing to just dance, because you know what? Dance around your kitchen, dance around your house. Let your body express itself rather than your mind or your judgment. Feel your body moving and stick on some music loud and go mental.
I love it. That has to be one of the most fun parting thoughts I've had on this show. That's perfect.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, I have too. And thank you so much for joining us. Let us know what you thought of the show today. You can reach out at info@journeyofpossibilities.com, and be sure and give us some support on the website as well. And we'll see you next week on Exploring Possibilities.